So the homie ZETA, he just made a video going over Superman's power level and just scaling him essentially. And there's a few things that he said in his video that I just could not agree with. Honestly, the entirety of his Outerversal scaling is just like faulty beyond belief. So with this, I just wanted to do a little bit of friendly competition because we were supposed to have a debate. And so to kind of hype that up, here's this vid.
The first feat is Superman being able to scale to mature Doomsday. The same Doomsday who was able to affect the Phantom Zone consistently and even have the capacity to break out of it and just, break it. If scaling to Doomsday wasn't enough, Superman literally admits that he can destroy this entire realm very easily. This same realm being consistently stated to be a dimensionless, timeless, spaceless plane of existence. This would fall under the criteria of Outerversal. This is going to logically follow as any entity or property that does not have time and space would also not be subject to the limitations or constraints within time and space. And being unlimited by the concepts of time and space is Outerversal by definition. So yes, Superman is Outerversal from this feat.
First things first, the scans that you use to get the Phantom Zone to Outerversal are outdated as fuck. This scan is quite literally from the Golden or Silver Age era of Superman comics, and this literally gets contradicted by the current age or even New 52. Calling it a dimension without dimensions is openly retconned as the fact that there are multiple geometric spaces and objects that are showcased within the Phantom Zone. A, there's no scan that you ever showed proving that the Phantom Zone is above or existing without the concepts of time and space. B, something being spaceless or timeless is not synonymous with being above or without the concepts of space and time. Something can be aspatial or atemporal, but the concepts can still apply. Something being above linear time or being outside the 3D space manifold can quite literally qualify as something spaceless or timeless, especially semantically in fiction. So no, the Phantom Zone is not inherently outer, neither is Doomsday or Superman. Not only that, but Superman cannot break the Phantom Zone or destroy it completely. If he could, then my only question would then be, why didn't his exact equal and opposite Rogol-Zar do exactly that? Why was he a slave to the Phantom Zone? Why couldn't he break out himself? Superman himself outright states that Rogol is his equal in both power, skill, and audacity. Like the scan of him being enraged in the Phantom Zone against Rogol-Zar, where he makes a statement about him being able to destroy the entirety of the Phantom Zone, comes from him after he saw the entirety of Krypton be destroyed again. He saw his parents die again, and not only that, but Rogol baldface admitted that he was the one that orchestrated the death of Krypton. I don't think Superman, while clouded by anger, is a reliable narrator. I don't think he's a reliable teller of his own power. I think he is, again, just somebody clouded by anger and that innate rage from what he heard, that he was quite literally just clinging to any destructive thought he had. Unlike his more level-headed self, where he outright claims that Rogol-Zar is his equal in power and Rogol cannot break out of the Phantom Zone.
But it doesn't stop here, because Outerversal Superman gets even more consistent. Enter Sundip Superman. Superman, after being oozed with energy from the sun, knocks out the World Forger, who is stated to be a six-dimensional being. Now, within the world of DC, the sixth dimension contextually refers to something completely different from the physical model of the sixth dimension. In the context of DC, the sixth dimension is in fact the highest plane of existence within the entire DC cosmology. This space is also, yet again, aspatial and atemporal. This is because it surpasses lower planes of existence, such as the time stream, a place that is stated over and over and over and over and over again to be beyond the concepts of time and space, not being constrained to dimensional space.
So ZETA mentions that the time stream is stated to be beyond the confines of time and space and dimensional space and things of that nature, and he makes these points under this preemptive basis that he's already proven this to be the automatic definition of these words. I'm assuming he means this because of the being used in linguistics, but even then, the is not an all-inclusive term inherently. The statement that confines of space and time refers to the limits imposed by space and time within a given context. It doesn't establish all possible forms, concepts, or ontological structures of space-time that are actually being transcended. In caveman terms, the word the highlights and specifies the confines of space and time. However, it doesn't automatically include all extents or all confines of said space-time. So you're essentially making a leap in logic with no backing or basis behind you. For example, let's just say you're watching a Nat Geo video about lions, and the narrator starts making a statement and says that this is beyond the limit of the lion. Now again, off of this linguistic structure alone, you're not going to automatically assume the idea that this is beyond all limits of all lions. Because truth be told, special cases exist, exceptions exist, outliers exist. And there's even cases where these outliers become so rampant and excessive to the point where it's no longer just a specified rarity. It's actually a consistent building block and a foundation, to where the statement this is beyond the limit of the lion can apply to some but not all, which falls back into your original burden. Why does the confines of time and space specify the overarching ideas of all spatial temporal structures? Until that point is justified, you cannot make the claim or the leap in logic that this is automatically assuming the ontological transcendence over all dimensional hierarchies.
Now, some people might argue,
but Superman was amped, so he doesn't scale to it in his base.
even if I accept that Superman doesn't scale to his amp self or the World Forger in base, he would surpass both of them in a later arc. This is because in that same arc, Superman receives a huge power-up to which he states that he is now stronger than ever before. This would obviously include himself from the World Forger fight, as that fight takes place before this event.
But why does that mean that's what Superman's factoring in? We know that the Sundips are external circumstantial amps that quite literally only come when circumstances align for Superman to get that powerful, and once those solar reserves deplete, he does not maintain that level of power. It's not a consistent thing, it's a temporary boost. So my question is, when Superman mentions being stronger than ever before and referring to his body body and mind, why is he not just talking about the consistent baseline that he has naturally without any type of existential circumstances? Like with Goku, you literally see him separate and distinctify the idea between his own power and fusion. He never mentions that fusion is his own power or his power alone. And even when he gets Super Saiyan God, that metric of power he compares himself to isn't fusion, he compares himself to his own power. That's the point I'm making here. Why can't Superman be following along that type of idea or mindset? Why is what you're saying more parsimonious or more abductive than what I'm saying?
And funnily enough, what's really ironic about this scan is that it also suggests that Superman is Outerversal. This is because Superman admits that concepts such as distance and space-time have largely lost their meaning to him. Now, I know some people are going to argue, oh, well, it says largely lost their meaning, so that means that time and space still hold meaning, therefore he's not Outerversal. This may sound like a validated critique, however, the GOAT Lemon, who's the consultant for this video, actually created a really good refute towards this argument that I found really interested in, so I wanted to add it to this video. Lemon argues that when Superman states that these concepts have largely lost their meaning to him, it's referring to the fact that they lost their meaning to him pragmatically, as in they don't limit his attack power or his speed, but they may hold relevance to him relating to his knowledge or relating to his mind. This already sets a framework which explains why he said largely lost his meaning to me. So this interpretation already holds explanatory power. It can be the case that the practical limits of space-time are devoid for him in the sense of not constraining his stats, but they're still valuable and meaningful ideas for him to operate upon relating to his knowledge. Because when we say the concept of space and time do not apply to X at all, we mean that the notion of space-time have no inherent meaning to them. They don't need such notions to base their perception of reality upon. For Superman, who is a three-dimensional being, such concepts can still be valuable to lay foundation of his perceptive abilities upon reality, but they do not restrain him in a practical case like his stats. That is why I believe he says largely than for them to lose all meaning to him. And to finally add icing on the cake to this interpretation in regards to consistency, Superman is capable of crossing distances that cease to be distances, proving that the concept of space or distance is meaningless to Superman in reference to his stats, which overall proves that he is Outerversal plausibly with this data.
I'm sorry, nigga, what? The statement is epistemic. It's not ontological at all, because largely lost meaning describes perception, not metaphysical transcendence. Superman still moves in moments, as said by him in the exact same statement you're using. This literally proves that time still applies to Superman, and crossing distances that cease to be distance is nothing more than speed compression. So at best, I see high-speed movement within the confines of space-time, not some type of conceptual existence beyond it. We need proof of ontological transcendence, not some poetic words and some decadent language.
More evidence supporting that the sixth dimension is Outerversal for consistency is the fact that it surpasses the source wall. Not only do guys just admit that the sixth dimension is beyond the source wall, but Mr. Nixie Pitalik states that possibility is granted if the source wall is damaged. The source wall is just going to hold relevance because it's literally stated multiple times to be a place beyond measurement, beyond dimensional measurement, a place without measurement, a realm that transcends dimensional measurements, which is Outerversal. And ironically enough, Superman also has a feat of breaking the source wall. He is definitely the most consistent Outerversal character in fiction.
I don't think the word measure is used in the way you think it is. Now, Superman/Batman issues 41 and 42, while Superman is trapped in the source wall, Batman grabs a hold of the Highfather's staff and he makes contact with Superman in the source wall. While he sees Superman in the source wall, he notices that Superman is moving inches closer to him and he's actually moving at a fast speed. However, as confirmed by the Highfather earlier on in the issue, it is actively expressed to us that this speed is finite and it is measurable. It's the speed of light. So again, Superman moving countable inches while in the source wall is active proof that the source wall is not beyond measurement. And see, this is where the question starts. All these statements about these things like being beyond space-time, why does that now put them in a hierarchy that transcends each other on a qualitative level to where you need to reach new infinities in order to get to them? Because I'm fine with them being layers of existence, but my question now becomes, if they're all layers of existence, what stops them from just being layers that transcend each other in nothing more than a topological manner, as in they physically exist one above the next, however they don't transcend each other on a qualitative level, as in each level isn't its own set of infinity, but all the higher layers commonly exist beyond the 4D manifold. I think that's more consistent as opposed to these random explanations of these being above the concepts of time and space and these things having their own set infinity with no type of evidence whatsoever.
Fiction. The sixth dimension shit is so consistent that even writers in DC admit that the sixth dimension is not a physical dimension.
That's not what Buddy is saying in that scan, like at all. He's simply just saying that he's not replicating the entirety of the science behind these dimensional frameworks, but again, they still hold some relevance as Scott himself makes the distinction that the science exists a bit separately for him.
Now to move on to the alleged debunks to DC being Outerversal or methods to try and downplay Superman. Now let's debunk some arguments or quote-unquote debunks people try to use to downplay Superman. People try to argue that the sixth dimension has time because Superman stated that the sixth dimension is a dimension where all of time exists at once. And obviously a place with no time cannot have time, so therefore the sixth dimension has time. I was initially fooled by this argument, but I actually looked into the actual comic and observed some more context, and no, this is not what it's saying. If you actually understand what Superman is talking about, he's talking about theoretical ideas that are implemented by scientists to understand their reality, and not the actual fifth and sixth dimension in DC.
So Zeta says he went back and got more context on the scans and actually went back and read the comic itself. Now, I put a little bit of skepticism on that because if you really read that comic, which is Batman/Superman World's Finest issue 27, if you really read that and genuinely came out with the idea that your interpretation of the sixth dimension being beyond geometric structure, being beyond all aspects of space and time, if you think that this comic issue proved that in any way, shape, or form, you're wrong. And I have to assume you just didn't read it. In this issue, the world's finest is going up against a villain by the name of Parasite, and when Parasite steals the dimensionality of Batman, Batmite, and Superman, he sends them to the second dimension. The second dimension where length and width are, to where Batmite is asking, where's the depth? And to save the three of them, Batmite ends up extending himself into the sixth dimension and bringing Batman and Superman with him, to where Superman, while disguising his identity, talks about how he interviewed some scientists about an article, to where Superman openly says that these theories map onto what he sees before his very eyes. So no, the interpretation that Superman is denouncing the idea of the theoretical sixth dimension and the DC sixth dimension being the exact same is not at all bad. And not only that, if you want to skepticize about Superman's credibility, Batmite actively confirms what he's saying in the next panel down. So with that said, the person that can frequent these six dimensions openly makes it clear that he's right.
And by the way, this is just going to be verifiably true because the sixth dimension is described to be beyond understanding. And obviously you cannot implement something that is beyond our understanding in order to make understanding about our reality. That is incoherent.
Wait, I'm sorry. What? Again, what? Once again, saying that it's beyond understanding or beyond imagination is not proof that it's beyond spatial or temporal structure, like at all. That wording only really describes a limitation in human cognitive ability. So how you're trying to reach to an ontological property of said thing itself when nothing here justifies that, I have no clue. There's a complete difference between something being impossible to fully conceptualize and something being structurally unbound by dimensional frameworks. For example, we can't truly imagine the speed of light in an intuitive sense, yet we can still see that it operates within space-time and is mathematically definable. We also can't fully conceptualize infinite timelines existing simultaneously or all of time occurring at once because of the human brain not being able to process that much information. But we still can model these ideas theoretically and apply baseline structures to them. The same goes for higher dimensional geometry or quantum superposition. They exceed intuitive visualization, but they still have formal structure. So the phrase beyond imagination is just beyond full comprehension, not beyond dimensional existence. Epistemic limitation does not equal ontological transcendence. If someone wants to argue that the sixth dimension is truly non-spatial or non-temporal, there needs to be actual evidence of the claim, not just people misinterpreting what is openly stated in a comic scan and then trying to apply that to their narrative however they see fit. And for even further proof that Superman is not above time and space to a point where he literally transcends the concepts, Superman, while in the sixth dimension, is moving at a speed that light itself can catch up to. Yes, it would take hours, but even then, that's still finite time being accounted for in the sixth dimension. And not only that, it's also evidence of Superman being bound by time and having speed that is bound by time.
So no, the statement is only talking about theoretical models of physical 6D and 5D space, and this statement is not literally reflective on the fifth dimension and the sixth dimension within the cosmology. Also, the prior scans I gave in this video make my interpretation more expected to be true. But also, even if I grant that the statements are reflective on the actual fifth and sixth dimension, the statement of where all of time exists at once does not automatically validate that the sixth dimension is temporal. This is because the sixth dimension can still be interpreted as a timeless realm, but one that governs or is the foundation for all possibilities. And funnily enough, there's actually something that backs up this interpretation in the exact same comic. This is because Superman states that the sixth dimension is a place that contains everything that ever was, is, or can be, which is existed within a simultaneous mode for an entity to oversee or manipulate. I mean, for God's sake, it's literally called the multiverse's control room. So when they mean by all of time exists at once, in simple baby caveman terms, they basically just mean that it's a place where one can oversee all of time.
The core issue here is a semantic and ontological distinction. Saying that all of time exists in the sixth dimension is not equivalent to saying that the sixth dimension merely controls or oversees time. These are categorically different claims. If the text states that all of time exists at once within the sixth dimension, that is an ontological statement. It describes time as present within the realm in a simultaneous mode of existence. It does not describe time as absent, transcended, or negated. You trying to reframe it as a control room overseeing time is nothing more than a substitution. It's barely even an interpretation. Governance and ontological inclusion are not interchangeable concepts. You can't just swap them because you want to make a narrative fit. And even more on that, calling it the multiverse's control room does not imply transcendence of dimensional structure. A control room is part of a structure's architecture. It presupposes structural integration, not metaphysical detachment. If it governs the multiverse, it is still situated within the multiverse's dimensional framework. So no, gang, all them goons in your comment section talking about this is how you scale Superman, no more downplay. They're losing their fucking mind now because they absolutely realize that 6D DC is still right there live and active. And you know what? I'm gonna keep it going. Let's talk about timelessness. There's a core difference between non-sequential temporality, which means all moments accessible at once, and true atemporality, which is the absence of temporal ontology altogether. A place in which the past, present, and future exist simultaneously is still temporal. It's still temporally localized, not temporally absent. So, if the sixth dimension contains everything that ever was, is, or can be, like the scan says, then it relies on temporal and modal categories for its very description. A truly timeless realm would not be meaningfully describing the past, present, and future at all, unless it would be completely transcending them. Therefore, the burden is still on you to show where the text establishes spacelessness or timelessness, because the scan only really supports simultaneity and totality, not a true ontological transcendence over all dimensional frameworks or over all spatial and temporal axes.
People will also try to argue that the fifth dimension does in fact have space and time because of this one fuck-ass bunny I don't remember the name of saying that the bleed is the fifth dimension. But this argument sucks ass and comes from people who don't know a single thing about DC, because the fifth dimension has imps, and the bleed does not have imps. So no, it is not talking about the fifth dimension, but it's just describing the physical fifth dimension within DC, the same way there is 3D and 4D.
So whoever makes the arguments that you're responding to, right, and you yourself, I think both of y'all are absolutely fucking insane. So the bleed is not the fifth dimension. That part is obviously true. However, your refutation is not anywhere near better. First things first, Captain Carrot is not saying that the bleed itself is the fifth dimension. What it is saying is that bleed space rotates through the fifth dimension. It exists in the fifth dimension. It is bounded by the fifth dimension. So while yes, you are right, Zeta, it is referring to a higher dimensional axis, that being the fifth dimension, you trying to separate that from the actual DC fifth dimension is just wrong. Because in the scan that you use to justify imps being in the fifth dimension, you skip over a key detail that lets us know that the reason why it's the fifth dimension is because it's beyond length, width, depth, and time, which is even further proof of the dimensional hierarchies in DC having some sort of geometric background. Again, y'all are literally disproving yourselves in your own video. Also, imps are not present in every corner of the fifth dimension, so you making that refutation would only presuppose that in nature, and you cannot prove that at all. Imps go through all of the dimensional axes, like from literally first to sixth, so I don't know why we're arguing this.